Hey guys, Montel here, and welcome to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel, where we talk about everything hemp and cannabis related, trying to see if we can make some decisions for you or help you make some decisions for your family when you go try to make some choices going into dispensaries and places like that to help navigate this daunting space called cannabis right now. And as we look at all the laws around the country start to mature, several states around the country are starting to implement and at least process applications for what are being called public consumption forums, and every state has a different name for them. Massachusetts is going to start opening up the doors and allowing for public consumption. What that exactly means is a little tough because some of the regulations are really different in every single state. I hear that in New Jersey is going to start doing it. They're going to start doing it in California. They've already been doing it in Nevada, and there may be an expansion of it in Nevada. But as we look at these spaces and we look at them start to open, you start to wonder, well, what are they going to look like? I remember visiting, Amsterdam, and I used to be a big supporter of the Amsterdam open public consumption spaces in Amsterdam. I used to go travel there. I'm telling you, for multiple years, I was going there maybe 2 or 3 times a year because I was really one of the only places in the world where you could literally sit down in a cafe type setting, no alcohol being served, coffee, soft drinks being served, some very, very light edibles, not infused edibles being served. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about like cookies or potato chips and things like that. But literally, you could literally sit in a place in Amsterdam outside and, sit back and smoke a blunt or a joint or a bowl, whatever you wanted to do, and not feel ostracized as if you might feel that way here in the United States, where if you walk in a park now, I've noticed sometimes when I go out in the evening, I'll walk my little puppy and, you know, wafting in the air is the fine smell of cannabis, and I'm okay with it. But I also can take another 30 steps past it and hear people behind me complaining, "Now somebody's smoking weed," as if it really is going to bother them. But somebody's got an attitude about it. But at least what's about to happen, and I think as we start to see the evolution of cannabis laws bear their fruit over the next couple of years, we're going to see more and more states opening up opportunities for people to consume publicly and socially with others. And my guest today is an award winning architect and designer. Her diverse body of work spans both residential and commercial projects throughout the United States. She's been recognized by the Urban Land Institute for Sustainable Development and has been awarded a gold and silver LEED certifications for her work. In 2019, she was named one of the top 25 leading women entrepreneurs in New Jersey, and now she has brought her talent to bear to the cannabis industry. Rachel Grochowski, thank you so much for being a member of Let's Be Blunt. Did I say your last name right? I mean, I didn't. Grochowski,
You
right?
know what? My last name is a tricky one. You were like as spot on as anyone ever has been.
Well, I thank you so much, Rachel. Well, thanks for being a part of this part of our discussion today. And tell me what's going on. First off, let's start this really about yourself. Tell me a little bit about you, about your background, where you grew up, where you went to college, where are you from?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. It's an honor to be on your show and in the conversation with you. I am originally from, I have like a long, long story, but I'm originally from Wisconsin, but I grew up in Colorado and went back to Wisconsin for college at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where their School of Architecture is. And, I think a lot of my values and ethics kind of come from those two parts of the country where there's a lot of indigenous individuals as well as connection to nature, etc. That's really informed my architecture, but also how I feel about cannabis.
And I think you got to give people a little schooling about Wisconsin because I didn't know this until I started doing some work at the University of Wisconsin in Madison years ago. But cannabis has always been kind of under the surface in Wisconsin, and most of the time people were left alone who were using cannabis, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I lived there until I was like 8 or 9 years old, and although it was definitely my parents were definitely uh, what would be considered the hippies, it was really common for the adults to be consuming cannabis openly in front of everyone, whether it was outside, inside, and nobody really thought anything about it. It was no different than smoking a cigarette, which was very common at that time.
And we're talking about this is way before there were open discussions about the fact that cannabis laws are being changed. We're talking, let's go back 10, 15 years ago, right? Even
Right?
20
No,
years ago.
absolutely.
Right. Okay. So you kind of grew up around cannabis. You knew a little bit about it, right?
Absolutely. In our family, it was often a conversation of, if you have a choice to, as a teenager, if you have a choice to drink alcohol or consume cannabis, my parents really preferred that we would go the route of cannabis. Obviously teenagers are experimenting. Interestingly, it wasn't didn't really resonate with me at the time. Nonetheless, like I tried it and I wasn't sure that I really liked it. It's very different today what the product is and what the product was then.
By what age were you back then?
I mean, I would say I was a high schooler, so maybe 17,
Gotcha.
16.
Gotcha. Yeah, and when you say it was very different, it was very interesting. I'm quite a bit older than you. So when we go back, I look back in time, you said the products were a lot different back then. I think there was difference in the delivery systems and difference in the variety of deliveries that you could get. But I will tell you, I can remember back. I'm a a very early boomer to the cannabis space, and I can remember back in the early '70s. And I still believe this till today, though I know there's some products in the marketplace that might give me the big bang and the big wow. I will tell you, I honestly don't remember experiencing a euphoria as high as the ones that I got back in the '70s as I get today. I don't even care what the product is. Now, some of the edibles, yeah, it's a different experience without a doubt. However, I will tell you that I can remember in '71, '72, I remember literally smoking a joint way back then where boom. I mean, I'm I remember lights out there for a while. I can remember there were times I played in a band back then, and and that's what introduced me to this from my bandmates. And the first experience that I had with it, I remember we had a band practice at my own house in my basement, and my parents were upstairs, and my bandmates who were way older than me. They said, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in 5 or 10 minutes. I was like, where you guys going? We're going to go out to the van. I said, what are you going to do? You don't want no part of that. And I was like, yeah, I do. What are you gonna do? So I went out to the van with these guys, and I remember coming back in and literally, trying to sing that I was a singer in the band back then and trying to sing that song. I was like, wait, stop. I had to stop. I had to sit down. I literally had to call practice off. I was out for about 2.5 hours, like in my basement. My parents were trying to figure out what I was doing. I was like, I'm just trying to clean up, and I kind of lost it. So, I think some of what we're experiencing now in cannabis, though in some ways, yeah, the cannabis appears to be much more powerful. I'm not necessarily sure that the impact that I got from it back then was much more powerful. It's just weird, strange. But anyway, so your first relationships, you said you weren't sure whether you liked it or not, right?
Well, and it's interesting as you tell your story, it kind of helps me reflect a little bit because it's almost the inverse. Like, it's not that it wasn't powerful and that it is powerful now. When I speak about it, it's that number one, I didn't have that much knowledge about it, right? Like now you can choose to be educated about it because it's easier to find. And I think you know, and so there's information about different ways which you would use it. Whereas then it was like, here's a bag of something and I'm gonna, put it into a pipe or it's gonna get rolled in and you didn't necessarily know how much of it you should have. It kind of is an experimental thing. I think probably more so than the quality, because I'm sure you're right that back then there was a purity that existed that I wasn't skilled enough to really know.
Right. Right now, so your usage of it just was more casual. I mean, were you a over time from high school till where did you go to college?
So I went to school I started at University of Colorado, and then I moved to University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and I was there for last 2 years of undergrad and graduate school. So, that was kind of, it's funny because I had like a young experience and then kind of things went on hold. I was focused on school and then got kind of reintroduced to it again later, maybe in grad school, towards the end of grad school.
Uh-huh. And now, were you a casual user that even while in college?
I do recall my college boyfriend was quite a connoisseur. And so casual, yes, I would say. But not, I wouldn't say frequent casual at that point in time.
So you're saying that your boyfriend at the time was a connoisseur, so he probably was able to get a hold of some fairly decent stuff. But again, you were just I'm not saying a dabber, but a dabbling in cannabis, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And did you go to college for architecture? What did you go to college for?
My undergrad is art and architectural history, and then I went to grad school for architecture. I got interested in architecture because I had been traveling in Europe, and it was really like the first time I started to understand or recognize that buildings hold something really sacred, that that buildings are the backdrop of our lives. I just started thinking about it on this level of sort of spirituality, that the memories and experience kind of get into the structure, and as generations go on, it continues to live and contribute to other individuals' experiences.
Gotcha. And so you got out of college, you started down your path. Were you working first?
Yeah, so I started out working in Chicago. I've sort of been all over the place. Started out working in Chicago, which is a great place as an architect to start. It's the architectural center of the U.S., or at least it was historically. And then I moved to New York really to dive into a level of design that wasn't really at the time happening in Chicago. And I worked for a couple of well recognized architects and designers, Russell Groves and Adam Tahani, doing both retail and hospitality projects that kind of gave me like the essence of what I'm doing now, and how I'm able to sort of craft the two and interrelate the two into one project.
Gotcha. And so what brought you to the cannabis field? I mean, what you started obviously first designing some spaces for dispensaries. Is that what started?
Yeah, it was actually quite interesting because I had done a project here in Montclair Film Festival building, and it's their education center, and they had a micro theater, and they have their headquarters there. And one of the donors really loved the space, and he was looking at launching a cannabis brand in the West Coast in Oregon, and asked me if I would want to design the space. For me, that was really it was an honor to be asked. Obviously, the quality of the design was that he liked was I was happy that somebody liked our project. But for me, it felt like I want to say kind of an opportunity that could open many doors, and also use a lot of the skills and talents I had, and then finally the fact that I personally have always believed in plant medicine, and just to be involved in the industry in a way that I could make a difference.
Gotcha. So when you set about thinking about a design of a dispensary, I mean, what were some of the most important aspects that came to mind for you in trying to incorporate in this space where people were going to walk in and look for healing?
Each dispensary is a little different. So now that we've been doing this for a while, I'm thinking about, who, first of all, who's your client? Is your client looking for wellness? Uh, are they looking for creative products that are going to sort of help them be creative? Are they looking for sort of a neighborhood joint? Are they like who is the client that the brand is gonna is going wants to attract? And when they're and so I'm starting to think about that because that goes into the type of service that you have. You know, a mom and pop kind of space, which is what we kind of started the brand started out as, is really more a one-on-one experience. It's a bud tender that is maybe going to either meet you at the door or you're going to approach them at the counter and you're really going to spend a bit of time with them. And then you have other brands where it's like, I just want to get in, get my product, and get out. And the whole design aesthetic is very, very different for those two types of brands. For me, you know, I could say what resonates with me, but I actually think that different dispensaries resonate with different people for good reason. Like you should feel at home and like you can, whether you're an expert or a novice, that you can ask a question or you can share your experience with the product so that you can help the brand.
I would say I have a product line in the marketplace in Massachusetts right now, and we're in 40 plus dispensaries. I've probably visited 30 of them, and almost all of them are different in their own right. And I can't really put a finger on. There were some of them that I would say that truthfully I've gone into. I don't want to say it publicly, but I have personally found an experience in those facilities better than some of the others, yet all of them seem to have their own unique appeal to their own clientele. And I've been in dispensaries where I've watched 30, 40, 50, 50 people in an hour walk through the door. And, I've spent 3 hours there. So 150 people over the course of 3 hours. And, out of that 150, I will tell you clearly you can divide it into maybe three different groups. There is a group that comes in, they want to walk in the door, they don't have a lot of time, they just walk in, out, they want to get their product, get out the door. They don't want to hear a lot about anything. They just walk in. Some of these people walk in, go to some sort of a electronic kiosk type of a thing, place their order, walk up to the counter and say, give it to me, let me go. Other people walk in, you'll see them walk around because they're really trying to absorb the space and trying to take a look at different things that are being offered. And other people come in because they want to have the experience of talking to someone. And that's where I do pop ups, and they'll come in and they'll speak to me before they go up to the counter and spend 4 or 5 minutes with a bud tender in the same facility before they leave. And so I have noticed, and I've traveled to dispensaries. I've had product in the marketplace in Oregon and in California. So I have literally traveled and been in dispensaries all over the country, taking a look at what I think the good, the bad, the ugly, but looking at them from a different perspective and saying, well, you're absolutely right. It depends not only what the brands are, and now because in certain markets that the dispensary houses 30 different brands and 100 different phenotypes. So, behind the counter, they have phenotypes that people are aware of, the big boards that explain all the different product that they have. And, there are customers that come in that seem to be pre-educated. There are customers that come in that have no education whatsoever. There are looky-loos that come in, or the kind of curious that want to learn. So to be able to put all that together in one aesthetic format, I think you have your work cut out for you.
It's absolutely true. I mean, I think that's why like I want to understand who a brand wants to be, so that we can support all of those that vision, right? And I also, for me, what makes it really interesting is when you can integrate like another layer of experience into a space. So whether it's a connection to art or music or health, wellness, or nature, like this idea that or a specific culture, when you start to integrate these ideas into it, it layers on this authentic experience that is part of part of the service as well.
Now, you have an exciting project that was just announced recently with a very well-known musician who's looking to, I guess, get into the consumption space area. not necessarily the dispensary space area. And in New Jersey, this is going to happen, right? So maybe why don't you
Yes.
tell me a little bit about the New Jersey law and what the requirements are? Because again, every state's going to be different. And in New Jersey, will your consumption facilities be attached to a dispensary or are they going to be standalone?
So right now, the state law says that the dispensary has to be attached, the lounge has to be attached to the dispensary. So you literally have to go through the dispensary to get to the lounge. There's a lot of very difficult regulations that are happening, and the as an example, like we cannot serve food, but we can have food delivered. The hours of operation for the lounge is different than the hours of the operation for the dispensary. They're wider, but yet you have to go through the dispensary to get to the lounge. So how is that going to work? You're either going to have to rope off a pathway, or obviously you're still going to have security that's going to be, you know, physically manned through the dispensary to make sure everybody's like making their way in and out. Obviously, all of the product is kept in the vault, so it's not like even the display fixtures will have real cannabis products in
But
them.
those displays will have to be inside the dispensary, not inside the lounge, correct?
Correct, but you still have to walk by them to get to the
No,
lounge.
I'm understanding that, but I mean, I'm just trying to get this clear in my brain. So I go out on a Saturday evening and I want to go to a consumption lounge. I have to walk through the dispensary. Obviously, that would be an opportunity for me if I wanted to purchase some product. I could purchase a product. I can then carry that into the lounge area. And then when I go into the lounge, because in a lot of the states around the country right now, until they have social consumption, you're allowed to go and pick up your product. It has to come to you like in Boston or in Massachusetts. You have to get the product, it has to be in a stapled shut bag that you have to then take out to your car. You can't open the bag on the property of the dispensary. But now when they open up the consumption lounges, I guess you'd be able to buy the product, walk into the consumption area, and you could open up your product there and actually consume it, right?
Well, that's a little bit blurry because really you go into the consumption lounge, you buy it in the consumption lounge, you consume it in the consumption lounge, and then you leave. There are some guidelines that are up to the operator, like whether they allow you to bring it in and consume is up to the operator at this current time for the New Jersey regulation.
So you're going to have a dispensary, a adjacent building. You have to walk through the dispensary, go into the adjacent building, and you can purchase in that adjacent building.
Purchase for consumption in that in our case it happens to be floors, so you walk through the retail, you don't necessarily have to buy anything, you go up to the lounge and you can purchase it there and consume it there and then leave, and theoretically you could purchase from the dispensary on your way out again.
Or
I
wow,
don't know if that's actually allowed, but I don't know how you regulate that.
that's going to be that sounds so strange. I mean, these laws are so draconian, it's ridiculous. I mean, the idea that you have to walk through the dispensary, you can't buy the product that you want to use in their own consumption lounge in the dispensary. You got to walk into the consumption lounge, buy the product there, consume that product there, leave, and come back and go to the dispensary to buy something you want to take home. So stupid.
Well, I think the if I don't know, I think that this is really about being able to the lounge to have control over how much they're selling to each individual, and that they know how much they've sold, and that's a maximum amount. If you bring it in, there's no way to really know how much somebody's consuming. So I think that's the rationale behind it. Obviously, if you leave and you stop in the dispensary and you purchase in the dispensary and you consume it immediately upon exiting, you've consumed outside of that boundary, that theoretical boundary anyway. But that's the idea behind it. But what it does is it gives you, from a lounge perspective, it gives you this opportunity to create a hospitality environment where you can potentially rent different types of products that, or tools, I should say, that you could use to consume. And so you can have an experience now instead of just bringing your product in and, hanging out with your friends, playing some cards, listening to some music. But now you can come in and say, hey, we want to use, the 7.99, amazing gold plated, bong or whatever it is, so that, and me and my friends are all going to use that. And there's a price tag associated with like renting that piece of equipment as well as then buying the product that you'll use with that piece of equipment. And they can, and from a hospitality standpoint, like you can marry the concept of, uh, whether it's the tool and the product into like one experience, and then vary it. And you could even have like a feature night. We've got this kind of music, and this is the bud that we're using in this kind of tool, and it becomes a total relationship. They're in relationship with each other.
This seems so. I can remember going to Amsterdam, and you go to dispensaries there, or you go to, they used to call them coffee houses there, and you walked in, you purchased your product, you go sit right across from the counter that I purchased the product at, and actually consume your product right there. They sold pipes, they sold other things. It wasn't a rental. You could buy something if you wanted. You could buy papers if you wanted, for rolling papers to roll your own, and you could sit right there in the facility and go ahead and fire it up. Um, I heard you say you can have food delivered. That seems, again, so bizarre. And again, food delivered would be non-infused food. Is that correct?
Correct. And that part I think is gonna have to change. It creates a lot of challenges in designing the lounge because
Yeah.
it can't continue that way. Like you're gonna have to be able to link food with the lounge at some point.
So
And whether
I
that's
could see, I
really
could see now. I visited a couple of dispensaries in Mass where, not on the property of the dispensary, but a half a block away, a food truck can pull up. So I can walk off the property of the dispensary, buy some food at the food truck. I can walk back into the dispensary, eating that product if I choose to, while I buy my cannabis product. But then I can't consume that cannabis product on that same property. So I got to get in my car and go down the block or go home, which seems so stupid because that means that you literally are even though the law says that you can't consume while you're driving, you're really kind of pushing the purchaser to consume while they're driving. You know what I mean?
right.
So some of these laws
Yeah,
have to be. I mean, could the food truck idea work in New Jersey too?
for sure, for sure. I mean, this location is like right in the middle of Newark. So the food truck idea feels like it's very likely. And you could also like create events around that, right? Like whatever type of food it is could be relative to the music that's playing or the event that the style of party or whatever that you're going to have that night. So on the one hand, if you look at the barriers as ways to uh, create some sort of creative solution, then it can actually result in something more interesting, maybe not more interesting, but something interesting. But I do think a lot of the regulations are going to evolve over time. And right now, because it's such a new idea, it's like it's everybody's handcuffed. It's kind of ridiculous. But at the same time, like anything else, like get it open and then start pushing the envelope is the way that many of us are looking at it.
Well, can you talk about who you've partnered up with when it comes to musician that you're this project that you're working on? Can you talk about it?
Yeah, so the brand is Hashtoria, and Ray Kwan from Wu Tang Clan is one of the. There's a handful of investors and founders, and he's one of them. And so the idea is that there's going to be a lot of live events. There'll be music. There'll be. We're also just down the street from the Prudential Center, so pre-show, post-show events, and. Uh, there's a handful of others whose names eventually will come out, but Ray's the one who's right now is, you know, vote is we're able to share, and it's exciting because he really cares about the brand, he cares about the experience. It's really about creating opportunities um, for people to experience the plant, and for him, he talks about how it's been part of his culture as a musician, as a creative individual.
So I mean, but it sounds to me like you're really, as a visionary to design the space, you're literally designing a almost like a I don't know how to put it. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out. It's kind of a space that would be a space used for parties. So you'll design that space first, then you have to add the retail component into that to allow for the sale of the product, and then you've got a really challenging mission.
Well, the as an example, in this specific location, the vault is one vault. All the product is in the same vault,
For the
whether it
dispensary and the consumption
for the
line.
dispensary and for the consumption lounge. And so, although there's a crossover, it is two different experiences too. Like the way this specific location is set up, you will have a branded experience in the retail, and it's not that it's completely disrelated, but
Well,
effectively the brand.
I would think that when you say you keep using the term branded experience, but most dispensaries that I go to carry 60, 70 different brands. So
Yeah, I guess what I mean is brand like Hastoria. So, whether this is the only location or others.
so the brand is the Astoria, that's the building, that's the name of the dispensary. But within that, you will find multiple different branded products.
100%.
And so I could go in and get, I don't know, different phenotypes of pre-rolls, or would you automatically be selling pre-rolls and dabs? And would you then be able to rent a dab unit if you wanted to? You could not have to sit there. I envision a place where, if I was going to go to a consumption lounge that was specific for cannabis consumption, I don't necessarily think I want to be sitting there rolling. I mean, especially since pre-rolls are already out there. And product is already out there, already prepared in delivery systems that would make it easier for me to consume. If I said I've been to a couple of consumption lounges in Berkeley and in San Francisco area where I've held a couple events there where as a pop-ups where I literally went in and show people how to dab my product, and so they had dab units available on a counter so people could come over and they would pre-purchase their participation at the door, and then they could come in and do whatever they wanted. And they could also go through the dispensary, purchase their product, walk next door, sit down, and again, the rigs and things would be provided to them so they could consume. Is that the kind of idea that you like to achieve?
Uh, More or less. I mean, I think again, because each state, as you pointed out earlier, each state's regulations are a little bit different, and so what's allowed in New Jersey is maybe slightly different than what's allowed in California or in the San Francisco, the Bay Area right now. But it's effectively what the experience will be there with Hashstory. Uh, there will not be, at least as far as I know right now, there's not going to be any sort of door uh, fee, entry fee. It's going to be inside, although that could change. I mean, again, as fast as we talk about it is as fast as the regulations are being edited and changed. And I think, no, there are no lounges open yet. We will be probably one of the first, if not the first, to open. And, I think there's maybe two others in New Jersey that are keeping pace with where we're at. So, it's a little hard to say exactly what it's going to look like. But the idea is that you will come in, you'll have the experience. You could spend hours there, you could spend minutes there, you could spend a whole day there if you wanted. You can only consume so much, right? So there'll be different events. It's a very hospitality oriented space. It is a lounge. It is I often think of it as like a blend of an event space and like what we understand as a bar, but just that people are consuming cannabis instead of alcohol.
And they won't allow any alcohol consumption. You can't even sell drinks there. Drinks meaning anything. You can't sell. Can you sell water?
Uh, it is not explicit. It does not explicitly say you cannot sell water, but right now you cannot sell any drinks. It just says you can't sell any beverages. So I'm imagining you can sell water, but it's not clear. It's not clear. They're going to have to.
They're gonna what?
We're set up the way it's set up. It's like for the future, right? So for us, you will have the ability in the future to be flexible. And that's kind of the name of the game right now is how can you create an experience while also including flexibility for the future?
And from an aesthetic standpoint, what are you incorporating? Are you incorporating couches, love seats, chairs, bar, countertop, and you envision people walking in. There's a group of people sitting at a bar area, and then there's a group of people sitting at tables around, or what do you envision?
I mean, it's, so that it's flexible with like also, what people are comfortable with. So like definitely lounge furniture, controllable lighting so that you can change the energy or the vibe of the space, depending on whether there's music playing or whether there's, some sort of, maybe there's a sporting event or so again, you have some flexibility there, but there's lounges and tables. Maybe somebody's coming playing chess, I mean, you don't know.
And
So
would they be
again,
bring in their own chessboards, or there would be a chess table already there? What?
that's all still under development, but I think the possibility of like having this opportunity to have these things is what we're looking to do. Is that whether it's a chess table or there's like a video game or it's a, you know, like I said, performance. It could be music, or it might be a recording of something. It might be poetry slam. Like the opportunity is endless. It's just a matter of testing out, see what resonates with people in the community, and then continuing to develop on that level. But the loungeness of it is kind of this kind of a little bit of luxury, but also a little bit of urban,
Basically, an open space that you will then fill up depending on what the event is.
right?
Got it. And
Right.
aesthetically, from a wall standpoint, I mean, I've been to places where they use, urban brick, or other places where they try to use, captured, old barn wood. I mean, have you kind of chosen your palette yet?
I mean, the palette is a blend of, like, I consider it kind of like urban luxury. So there's a little bit of softness to it, but there's like the soft and the hard, which I think is kind of life.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Do you plan on trying to venture out and establish this, and then venture out in other states that are opening up for public consumption, and basically putting together a model that you can cross state lines with? Because I don't see how there would be any interference with that. Or is it going to be each space one at a time, designed to the likes of the person who's the owner?
For me, I'm focused on creating spaces that are individual for each brand and each potential or each actual client, because we have quite a few dispensaries right now that we're working on, and they all have their own character and personality. The lounges are we're just starting to get into that conversation because there aren't that many in New Jersey. There aren't that many licensed, and obviously in a lot of states where there are licensed, they're not open yet. So we are looking at continuing to develop this idea because we've worked on hospitality projects, whether they're bars or restaurants, where which is kind of similar, right? Like each one has its own personality, and I think even from marketplace to marketplace, it's important to have a relationship with either the city or the state or the community that you're servicing.
Got it. And, as a woman in this business, I mean, you're kind of unique. I mean, do you think there are other opportunities for other women to get involved in this too?
Absolutely. I've been talking to a lot of women who are in the industry, and a lot of my friends have shirts, women in weed, t-shirts, women in weed. It's a whole uh,
Movement.
conversation
Sure.
that's growing. And I have friends who are in the hemp area. We're working on a farm project, a cultivation project that's a female founder. So there's definitely places for women to get involved. And I think even, from the design side and the architecture side as well, there's lots of female designers. There aren't as many female architects, but it's certainly a place to get your feet wet. And I mean, architects are used to regulation. This is just a different type of regulation. But for me, I find that sort of the ethics behind it is also really interesting. And there's just something bigger than just designing a project that's for a dispensary or a lounge that I find compelling and interesting and brings me to the table. And I hope it brings other people to the table too.
Wow. Well, good. Well, if people wanted to get a hold of you or find out more information, where would they go? Give out some digits.
They can find us at rhgdesign.com or at
RHG. Say that real slow.
G is in Grover,
Okay.
rhgdesign.com, and on Instagram at rhgdesign, and or they can email me at Rachel, Rachael, at rhgdesign.com.
Okay. And, I mean, just in closing, I mean, what are your thoughts about how you see this industry rolling out over the next 3 to 4 years?
Well, first of all, my first hope is that people start to understand that this is not a scary thing. This is part of nature that is also part of us. Like, we are part of nature. And that through that understanding, some of these regulations start to open up. And uh, therefore, the opportunities become wider. We also work with a lot of uh, micro dispensaries, and I'm hoping that this interest and effort in social equity is actually real and it actually comes to fruition instead of becoming, I guess what I want to say is backfiring. Like, I feel like there's a lot of possibility for it to backfire, and I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that we find a way to get this right, and people who should be creating generational wealth through this industry really can. And for me, as an architect and designer, I think that's it seems like a different conversation, but it's important to me. And then lastly, I do think as an industry, this is going to become a massive hospitality experience. I think there's going to be more and more wellness retreats and conversations around how the plant can actually help you heal and help you feel good in order to be productive and sleep well, be creative, all of these different things. And I think, you know, I just think that it's going to grow into this massive hospitality industry.
Absolutely. I agree with you too. I think that you're going to see a mega growth in this in the next couple of years. So, congratulations on all the hard work you've been doing, Rachel, and keep me posted. Let us know what's going on with your place in New Jersey, and whether or not you expand to multiple other places in New Jersey. And um, keep us posted. You're always welcome back here to give us an update, tell us where you're at, show us some of your designs and those kinds of things. Um, Happy to know that you're in this space and working at it from the right place.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We have a great day, and want to make sure all of our viewers remember that they can reach out. Give them one more time the digits.
rhgdesign.com
RHG
or at
Design.
rhgdesign.
Come on now. So everybody who's been watching, if you want to get some information about, a fourth thinker in this space, reach out to Rachel, and she may be able to help you. And keep tuning in to Let's Be Blunt with Montel for more and more information. I want to thank you for being a part of the show today. Thank you, Rachel. Stay well. I'll see you on the next Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.